Go ahead and grab your Bibles and turn to James chapter 3 and hold that in readiness. There are a lot of voices out there trying to tell you what to do. Now, if we're honest, we would all admit that we don't have this thing called life figured out. And with that honest admission comes a second. We seek wisdom. We seek advice. But there's so much advice swirling around out there that's not easy to find the right advice. It's really easy to get confused. Now, last week, James described for us a wisdom not from heaven. It is a wisdom that is earthly, and it is all around us. So how can we detect true wisdom that comes from heaven? From wisdom that comes from earth. James tells us that bitter envy and selfish ambition are the driving forces of the wisdom that come from the earth. So he has described one aspect of the wisdom that comes to us as we seek advice. But how can we tell the wisdom that comes from heaven? How do we know which advice to take? I'm going to get on my soapbox here for a minute. Some of you may disagree with me, and that's okay. But I'm just here to tell you that I'm tired of our educational directors taking advice from psychologists and advisors who tell them certain things that need to happen for the health of the child. Yet those psychologists and those advisors have never had children of their own. These so-called professionals have never utilized their own advice on their own children because they have none. Yet this is the advice that our society has chosen to listen to. If you want my advice, we should be talking to the people who have multiple kids, who have already matured, have proven to be good citizens with a strong work ethic and right thinking. We should take those people and we should ask them what they did, how they did it, and we should be duplicating that. These are the seasoned parents who know how to raise kids, yet by today's standards, their tactics are labeled as too harmful for the kids of today. Now listen, I would never have been happy with a participation award, yet we give them out all the time. Last year was the last year that I was able to coach a group of young men in the game of basketball as they aged out. We lost the championship game, meaning in the whole league, we came in second. And as a great accomplishment, when you consider the very first year that we played in this league, we didn't even win a game. For this accomplishment, the players got a runner-up medal. I don't know what the other boys did with their medals, but two of my sons were on that team, and I have one of their medals hanging in my office because they didn't want it. Kids don't want participation awards. They want to be winners. Yet the professionals say that all kids need to feel as if they are equal, and so we give out participation awards. Okay, so that's the last of my rant. Some of you may be wondering, what does this got to do with what we're going to be talking about from James today? It merely points out to us that there are multiple voices out there trying to tell you how to raise your kids, trying to tell you how to behave at work, trying to tell you how you should run your finances, trying to tell you how to work up that social ladder. They're trying to tell you a lot of things. How can we tell the wisdom that comes from heaven? James tells us in James chapter 3, verse 17 and 18. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. Peacemakers who sow in peace raise a harvest of righteousness. Now, James gives us a wide range of qualities for us to look for in the wisdom to determine if it's from heaven or if it's from earth. And the first of these is a wisdom that is pure. What does it mean that something is pure? Now, I have defined this word pure multiple times over the years, and I would just like to hear if one person could define for me what it means to be pure. Do you know? If you know what it means to be pure, just shout it out. What is the definition of pure? Everybody's afraid. Okay, undefiled, without blemish, sinless. You cheated. I thought somebody actually got it and she cheated, looked on the phone. To be pure means it is unmixed or it is not mixed with anything. That's what it means to be pure. Okay? I like to use water as an example. Advisors like to use the word pure to sell their product. And they will say something like pure mountain water. Now, if that water came from any other source than mountain water, they're lying. If they doctored that water up in any way, trying to clean it up or anything like that, they're lying. How about just pure water? If a company is selling pure water, there cannot be anything mixed in with the water. It can only be 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen, nothing else. There can be no minerals, no vitamins, no amino acids, nothing added to it. For it to be pure water, it can only be 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen. That's it. Now that we know what it means to be pure, how can we tell if the wisdom being given to us is pure or not? That depends on what your end game is. If you want wisdom that is from heaven, then the advice cannot be mixed from anything but what comes from the Bible. So if someone gives you advice and can show you where that advice comes from in the scriptures, you have a better chance of that wisdom that is being shared, that it's pure. And I said you have a better chance and not 100% perfect, because people like to twist the scriptures all the time to make it say what they want it to say. So there's an element of you checking to make sure what the scriptures that they are using for their wisdom, that they're not twisting it in any way. Look at James chapter 3, verse 17 again. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving. I like to use the word peaceful as opposed to peace-loving. Peace-loving means you love peace, but peaceful means that you act on that love of peace and you bring about peace. Webster defines peaceful as untroubled by conflict, agitation, or commotion, devoid of violence or force. Now, notice that being peaceful doesn't mean you will not have conflict, but rather that you will not allow the conflict to trouble you. You won't let the conflict agitate you. You won't let the conflict become a commotion in your life. I often tell people that to become a Christian does not mean that your life is going to be easy. I talk to people about this all the time. There are many people out there trying to convince people to become Christians by only talking about the positive things of the Christian life. They sugarcoat the true reality of what it means to be a Christ follower. They skip over the words of Jesus that tell us that we will not be better than our teacher or our master, and they crucified him. I tell people all the time that being a Christian does not keep us from the tough parts of life. Rather, the promise comes to us in the last part of the Great Commission. We like to focus on the words go and make and baptize and teach, and those are words that we do need to focus on. But the greatest part of the Great Commission to me is the last part of verse 20. This is where Jesus says, and surely I'm with you always to the very end of the age. This is a promise that I hold to. For those who are committed, and they are going, and they are making, and they are baptizing, and they are teaching, life will be difficult. You can count on it. There will be challenges. There will be heartaches. But no matter what we go through, we have peace because Jesus promises to be with us. The wisdom from heaven is a wisdom of peace. Does not bring conflict, but will also keep you untroubled by conflict when conflict shows up. The wisdom from heaven keeps the peace, and in situations where there is no peace, it brings the peace. Look at James chapter 3, verse 17 again. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate. The New International Version has the word considerate. I like this word because Webster defines it as being thoughtful of the rights and feelings of others. It gets our eyes off of ourselves and onto other people, and I like that. But the English Standard Version, the New American Standard Bible, the New King James Version, and the King James Version all have the word gentle. So I feel that this would be a better operating word for us at looking at wisdom that comes from heaven. According to Webster, to be gentle is to be free from harshness, sternness, or violence. Something about the wisdom that comes from heaven is its nature to want to help people to become mature. It wants to build people up instead of tearing them down. So naturally, with anything that wants to build people up, there's an element of being gentle about it. Peter understood this. Chapter 3 of 1 Peter, Peter talks about us always being prepared to give the reason for the hope that we have. We should be prepared to give the reason for the hope that we have. But he ends this by saying, but do this with gentleness and respect. Even in the defense of our faith, we are to be gentle, free from harshness, sternness, or violence. So when wisdom is presented to you, if it's not gentle, it's not wisdom from heaven. Look again in verse 17. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive. This word is a difficult word to kind of nail down. The New International Version has the word submissive. The New American Standard Bible has the word reasonable. The New King James Version has willing to yield. And the English Standard Version has open to reason. When looking at these, I think that the mixing of the New International Version and the New King James Version has the right attitude behind it. To be submissive means that you are willing to yield to others, which is the same thing that the New King James Version has, to yield. A submissive wisdom is one that doesn't look to cause conflict, as we saw in being peaceful. It is not harsh, as we saw in being gentle. And it offers to yield to others to be able to keep the peace, as it says here. Now, this is an area that is very tricky, because I believe that while the wisdom from heaven is submissive, it does not yield to everything. The first level that we yield to is God's will. When there is a wisdom that contradicts the will of God, we do not yield to it. We choose to yield to the will of God instead. We submit to Him first and foremost before anything else. However, if there's a situation about how something is to be done, but it doesn't have anything to do with the will of God, say a certain way that a boss wants a job done, you were to yield to that boss's desire. We are not a people to cause problems, for that does not display the wisdom from heaven. Actually, it displays the earthly kind of wisdom. Going back again to verse 17, we find, but the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy. What is mercy? Mercy is in not giving people what they deserve, especially when talking about a punishment that they deserve. This is the police officer looking at you through his dark sunglasses with his ticket book out, having pulled you over for speeding, or maybe crossing 4 lanes of traffic to make a left turn. Instead of giving you a ticket, he decides to give you a written warning instead. The fact of the matter is you were going 15 miles per hour over the speed limit, and you were to receive a penalty because of that, a fine, and points on your driving record. But this police officer realizes that you were late for work, and he has been there a time or two himself. He does point out to you the risks that you're placing on others because of your speeding. A misstep at such speeds could cause for death of yourself or death of someone else. But instead of giving you the ticket causing for fines to be paid and points to be put on your driving record, he decides to give you a written warning instead. That is mercy. The wisdom that comes from heaven doesn't like to stick it to people, even though they deserve it for their actions. The wisdom from heaven is full of mercy, and therefore, as that wisdom is lived out in your lives, you too are a person who is full of mercy. James says, but the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy, and good fruit. This is not the first time that we have come across this type of thinking here from the book of James. Matter of fact, much of chapter 2 has to deal with our actions, our good deeds that accompany our faith. Jesus also discusses this thing of good fruit versus bad fruit. He actually calls us to become fruit inspectors in Matthew chapter 7. His desire is for us to look at the lives of the teachers to see what their lives produce. If they produce bad fruit, stay away from them. If they produce good fruit, adhere to their teaching. The wisdom that comes from heaven is wisdom that would produce good fruit if it is followed. So look into the wisdom that you consider and look ahead to what it would produce in your life. Because if that wisdom is from heaven, it would produce good fruit. James says, but the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial. This is something James already talked about back in the first part of chapter 2. If you remember, he used the illustration of a wealthy man and a poor man coming into the meeting. If when we gather together, we tell the rich man to take the place of honor and the poor man to take the place with less honor, we are showing favoritism. Specifically, James says that we show special attention to the wealthy man and give him a good seat. The poor man, we offer for him to stand or to sit on the floor. The wisdom from heaven doesn't show favoritism to things that are not eternal. We are not a people who are biased based on skin color, social position, level of wealth, titles, where we come from, or the amount of possessions that we don't or do have. The wisdom that comes from heaven doesn't show favoritism. However, earthly wisdom is really only concerned about you and those you love. It's riddled with favoritism. Last characteristic of the wisdom that comes from heaven is given in the very last part of verse 17. James writes, but the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. Now, the New International Version and the English Standard Version have the word sincere, meaning that the wisdom from heaven is genuine. It's not something in one place and something in a different place. See, it's very easy to compartmentalize our lives depending on who we are with or where we are at. If we are different people when we are around people of faith than we are at work, then we are a people who compartmentalize our lives. If we do this, then we're not sincere. We're not genuine. What I mean is if we have more patience with people of the faith than we do with people we work with, we're not sincere. If we give more grace to the people of the faith but not to those we live with, we're not genuine. A sincere person is one who is the same no matter where they are. A genuine person is the same person no matter who they are around. And while the New International Version, the English Standard Version, uses the word sincere, the New American Standard Bible, the New King James Version, the King James Version all use the words free from hypocrisy. Hypocrisy is saying one thing but doing another. For instance, a person who says that we're not to gossip and that gossip is bad, but they share tidbits of information by using a disclaimer. I'm not gossiping, but did you hear what so-and-so did? Gossip is wrong. It is heavily degraded in the scriptures. It is not to be on the lips of God's people, no matter who you're around or where you are. Now, over the years, the church building has taken on a special honor like that of the tabernacle or the temple, but the scriptures are clear. The temple is not the church building today. The temple is the people who gather in a church building. It's us. The emphasis is no longer on building materials and the like, but it's on people. But this is not understood by society even today. A person will come into the church building and they'll say something like, well, I just can't say that word in the church. But you can say it out of the church. If you hear a person say something like this, they're not a sincere person. They're not a person free from hypocrisy. If it's wrong to say it, it's wrong to say it, no matter who you're around or where you are. It's wrong. The wisdom that comes from heaven is sincere. It is free from hypocrisy. It is genuine. Now, we live in a world with all kinds of opinions out there. Every opinion can be put into one of two categories. The wisdom that is shared either fits into the wisdom of the earth or the wisdom from heaven. The wisdom from the earth encompasses bitter envy and selfish ambition. It is a wisdom that is earthly, unspiritual, and James goes even so far as to say it is of the devil. It produces disorder in every evil practice. Take a look at the earth today, and you'll find much wisdom that is bringing disorder and evil practices. The wisdom that you seek is either of the earth or it's from heaven, which is pure and peaceful, gentle, submissive, full of mercy, full of good fruit, impartial, and sincere. So next time you find yourself in a spot, consider the wisdom that you seek. Look ahead as to what it would produce. Begin to decipher between earthly wisdom and heavenly wisdom. Don't just use this heavenly wisdom for yourself. Be a person who is constantly in the Word of God, so that when people ask you to give a bit of wisdom, you won't lead them astray with earthly wisdom. Rather, you'll lead them in the heavenly wisdom that they need. You pray with me. God, there are a lot of voices out there. I pray that we can train our ears, our hearts, and our minds to the leading of the Holy Spirit. We can be a people of your word. We can know your word. We can have your word memorized in our hearts and our minds, and that we can be able to decipher clearly and accurately what is of the world and what is the heavenly wisdom that James talks about. And then I pray, God, that we make the choice to live in the heavenly wisdom, that we can point people to you, bring glory and honor to your name. In your Son's name I pray. Amen.